I like to think I've written software for a good while now. When you've done it for long enough, you start to recognize some patterns, perhaps even some cycles. That's what I'm here to talk about today, the unending cycle of being a software developer. This unending cycle I like to divide into 3 phases. First is the learning phase. Second is the suck phase. And third is the coasting phase. They're all wonderful, and they're all awful, and they're all full of wonderful little traps. I'll tell you how to work through these different phases systematically and a bit less chaotically. The first phase is the learning phase. This is a super fun phase. This is where you go into it and you know you're a filthy casual. You know that everything is going to be brand new. You're not gonna be flashy or anything like that. And there's tons of tutorials and tons of documentation for the thing you're trying to learn. So it's really just a matter of going through the motions. And yeah, sometimes there are challenging things, but a lot of the time you're moving through it. My first language was Java, and learning that for the first time was its own thing. But when I had begun to learn Python after the fact, it was a whole new world and was a great example of the learning phase for me, especially when I found out that printing anything in Python took far fewer lines. For a beginner, this could take the form of a new language, or it could be the first 3 months of your job, where people don't have any expectations from you other than just learning a little bit every single day. For experienced people, learning a new level of abstraction is a great way to get into the learning phase because you already know the process of programming, but there's something new to learn, right? So if you're going from like Python to C++, you already know how to use syntax and all those things, but you now get to learn a new level of abstraction, which is exciting for a lot of people. Now, there is one huge trap that you have to think about when you're in the learning phase, and that's getting addicted to the learning phase. There are plenty of people who will go and learn something, and then as soon as they exit the learning phase and get into the suck phase, they move on to another project, and the loop just keeps going over and over and over again. They never get out of the learning phase. Perhaps I am attacking you. The way to get around this is to just set up a schedule around your learning phase. The idea is that you're setting a foundation for being able to stay consistent with yourself once the learning phase is over, once the fun parts are over. The last thing you want to do is to set yourself a schedule that's incredibly aggressive. It might be great for the learning phase, but once you get to the suck phase, you can't do it. But we'll get to that later in the suck phase. Speaking of, the next phase is the suck phase. This sucks. This really, really sucks. It sucks so bad. But you can get through it. For this phase, I brought along a cat, so you might hear purring, but this will give you comfort as you realize how bad this phase is and how much you'll need this cat. Guess what? This is the longest phase, or at least it feels like it to me. In this phase, it is incredibly easy to second guess yourself, and even easier to feel like you're stupid. This is normal, this is fine. It doesn't matter if you're experienced or not, you're gonna hit this at some point when you're learning something new. For a beginner, this might be struggling with coursework. You might be a couple years into your degree now, and you've gotten all the easy classes out of the way, and now things are just tough. Things are really tough. Maybe you've gotten a job, brand new job, maybe your first job out. 6 months in, the expectations start to rise a little bit, and you see that you're having a hard time. For more experienced developers, there's an instinct to hack away at things and try to really understand them. When you're in the suck phase, you're doing that, and then nothing works. Nothing. Everything you try is just broken in some form. Sometimes you even understand what you're trying to do, but then when you put the pen to paper, so to speak, it just doesn't work. The big difference with the suck phase between someone who's experienced and new is that an experienced person will have preconceptions of how things will work and then find out that it just doesn't work that way. This is a good segue into the traps. The first trap is that this phase will try its hardest to get you to give up. It is insane. You'll start thinking all kinds of stuff like, am I good enough? Is this even worth doing? Am I just spinning my wheels? You just gotta get through it. You gotta just go through the motions every single day. And I would say that this is hard mostly for people that are newly experienced. And here's why. Like I mentioned earlier, you have preconceptions, and at the same time, you're not experienced enough to know that feeling stupid all the time is just a normal part of the programming process. It's just always going to happen. So knowing that you're in this phase will help give you perspective on, oh, this is just the suck phase. I just need to get through this. I need to understand some things. Perhaps I have preconceptions that I had before that now I need to think about again. Recently, within the past few months, I've been learning Ruby on Rails, and there was a point early on when I was working on my first project where I wanted to make nested comments. It sounded simple at first, but no, it was not. Especially when you're learning a new framework, there is a lot that goes into it. I come to realize that there was a piece of Rails that I needed to understand, which was turbo frames. It took me about a week to understand how they work. I won't go into any technical detail for this, but my gosh, there was a period of time where it was just, I was like, what is happening? Am I stupid? I've programmed for years, and this relatively simple concept of going from one page to another, sort of, kind of, in real time, was just blowing my mind. I saw it on paper. I was like, oh, this makes sense. I went and implemented it. It wasn't working for one reason or another, and it was just a mess. It was the perfect conditions for me to give up on Ruby on Rails. It was fantastically perfect. But I just pressed on. Eventually, I was able to build upon that with more complex concepts. In short, times where you are failing is not wasted time. The coasting phase. Now, this phase is really chill, smooth waters, all that sort of stuff. But it's kind of boring, like really, really boring. Now, while it can become tedious if you let it, there are cases where it's a bit of like a success, right? Because that means that you've learned the things that you needed to learn. You got through the suck phase, and all that crap you can just kind of leave behind you. But if you stick around for the wrong reasons, you may not learn much. You may even get an inflated sense of skill. I'll be real with you now. I'm working on an exercise tracking app in Ruby on Rails. There's a point now where I'm just doing the things. If I want a feature, I just add it. If I don't like something, I take it out. Of course, I'm not saying I've mastered Ruby on Rails, but the things that I need are there for me. And there's nothing else I need right now. But there might be a point where I have to learn something new in order to implement a particularly complex feature. That might come on down the line. For now though, I am satisfied with what I know. For a beginner, the coasting phase might look like getting really good at making console apps. The ones where you do a number guessing game, or you master the for loops, or you master if statements, or this or that. But you can't make anything of substantial value. You can't access files, you can't organize files, you can't build any web-related things. It's all just theory. It's things that are being printed out to the console. Perhaps you end up in this phase for a while and you think you know the language, but really you just know the syntax of the language. For someone with more experience, this could just take the form of things being super routine. If you work at a job where you've learned what you needed to learn, then you're good. You could just coast. And for some people, that's enough. That's fine. In fact, you could just spend more of your time doing other things like spending time with family or just learning things outside of work that are not related to work. Now, there's a couple of traps to keep in mind for the coasting phase. The first one being that it is very easy to not realize you're even in the coasting phase. Things start to feel routine. You start to feel competent. With that in mind, leading into the second trap now, coasting does not mean you are competent at the thing. It just means that you are comfortable enough to serve your purposes and no further. My biggest advice with coasting is just be humble. If you decide to just stay where you're at, that's cool. But if you want to learn more, you're gonna have to go back into the suck phase. Some people will simply stay in this phase so that they don't have to go back into the suck phase. That's not a good enough reason. If you want to learn, you're going to have to go back into the suck phase. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. There's a few ways that you can look at this where people can skip, they can take longer in certain phases. There's a lot of different things you can do. This isn't a one to the next system where everything is evenly and neatly spaced out. For example, you'll have people that just want to aggressively learn new things, and they will spend time in the learning phase, and they will, very importantly, spend all the time they need on the suck phase. They will get a project from 0 to 1, and then they might end up in the coasting phase a little bit, but then they realize it, and they move on to the next project that will push their learning experience. Another one is people who go to a job, they learn some things, they may be at the suck phase for a little bit, then they coast. And that's totally cool because you have plenty of time to do things that you want to do outside of work. Then there's people who might just want to learn a new framework, but it's similar to something they already know. So all they need to do now is just pick up the little bits and pieces that they don't know. So there might be like a short learning phase followed by a very hopefully short suck phase, followed by a coasting phase shortly after. Overall, it's incredibly beneficial to know what stage you're in because it gives you context into what you should be doing next. If you're in the learning phase, it'll help you be prepared to expect things to not be so easy. If you're in the suck phase, it's good to know that you're in the suck phase and you can say, okay, it's not always going to be like this, that's fine. And then when you're in the coasting phase, that's a good way to just kind of give yourself a bit of a bump and just be like, wait, hold on, I'm stagnating. Am I okay with this? It's a tough cycle to wrangle, it really is. I still struggle with it, to be honest, but that's programming. There's always going to be some exception, there's always going to be some weird thing you just did not anticipate, and sometimes things are rather pleasant. But anyway, what sort of phase are you in these days? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Hello, gamers.
Alright, that looks good.